You are listening to programming from the East-West Center in Washington, D.C.
I know it's a little bit of a rainy, cool morning, but really appreciate everyone turning up. First of all, let me say, my first name is Satu, and last name LeMay. I'm the Vice President of the East-West Center and Director of the East-West Center in Washington. And we're delighted to welcome you to the launch of the 7th edition of ASEAN Matters for America, America Matters for ASEAN. Everyone in this room knows very well the importance of ASEAN, the recent ASEAN meetings, summits that the administration attended and showed its engagement with the region and with the various 10, now 11 countries of ASEAN. And this is an opportunity for us to build on the launch of this report in the region here on Capitol Hill with members of Congress, with members of the business community, with the representatives from the embassies of ASEAN countries here, as well as the State Department and other U.S. government agencies and departments, and all of you. So welcome, and thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedules to be here. My job is just to sort of be a traffic cop for the program this morning. We're going to have a series of remarks from important people who made this publication possible. That includes the US-ASEAN Business Council, the Yusof Ishak Institute for Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, both long-standing partners from the second edition onwards, or the first edition onwards, for this publication, and some remarks recorded from our president of the East-West Center based in Honolulu, Hawaii. And then we're delighted to have Deputy Assistant Secretary for Southeast Asia and ASEAN Affairs, Mr. Hunt Vandertol from the State Department. We're delighted that we're able to make it. Thank you for your time. And of course, His Excellency Ambassador Sharul Yaakob from Embassy of Malaysia. Very important this year as the chair of ASEAN, so we're delighted to have you. And then we'll have an opportunity to have some remarks from Congressman Ed Case. And there may be other members. We're, as you know, the first day back in full session, so it's a little bit of a moving target, but we hope to have other members who've signed up throughout the morning to step in and give some remarks. And then we'll have a small fireside chat with Barbara Weisel, formerly of the U.S. Trade Representative Office, and Mario Masaya from the US-ASEAN Business Council. They're going to talk about some of the commercial, investment, trade, and technology elements of the US-ASEAN relationship, which this publication primarily focuses on. And then we'll move to a reception, and a couple other members of Congress hopefully will join us. So that's the run of show this morning, and it gives me great pleasure now to invite a longstanding partner, US-ASEAN Business Council's President, Brian McPheeters.
Well, thank you so much, Satu, Ambassador, Das, Vandertol, Barbara, colleagues. It's great to be here. I think I'm on this cold, wet morning. I'm one of the warm-up acts, as we get into the concert that's gonna happen. I just want to talk about the importance of this document, this study from the point of view of US-ASEAN Business Council. We're a trade association. I think all of you in the room are familiar with us. 194 companies across all sectors doing business in ASEAN. And what's interesting about this study is, you can go through and read the numbers about, there's this much trade, there's this much investment. Sometimes you can look at these numbers and say, well, they're just sort of abstract numbers. But the way I look at them is like the reason that there's $553 billion of trade between US and ASEAN now, and the reason that there's 714,000 American jobs supported by US-ASEAN trade investment is because of what the companies are doing. So I mean, it's not like it just happens. So we're really proud to have a few companies particularly sponsoring this study. This year it's AIG, Atlas Air Worldwide, Micron Technology, Citi. I think Citi's representing the room. I don't know if anybody else is here. Freeport McMoran and Zulu Pharma. That allows this study to be done every 2 years. I'm told that this, I think Satu, maybe you started this started as like a poster on somebody's wall and then emerged. Maybe we can hear about the evolution of this. But I think all of us, I feel like in this room, probably everybody is here on this morning because you already have an interest in Southeast Asia. But if you go outside this room, I think all of us who work in this field kind of have this duty of like telling people about Southeast Asia, the importance of Southeast Asia. It's the 5th largest economy in the world, on the way to being the 4th largest. There's more investment, more U.S. investment in ASEAN than there is in China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea combined. So that's something that we know in this room, but I think many people in the outside the room don't. I had this idea when I was riding the metro in this morning that like the great thing would be if we all take 10 copies of this hard copy study and kind of leave it randomly on the metro. Right? That would probably educate. We could educate maybe 200 people that way. I think that's something that we have to keep doing. But I do find I've been going to Indonesia and other countries in ASEAN off and on since 1994, a lot of that time with the State Department. I do find that there's a change in 2 ways. One is more people in the United States know about ASEAN. I was at an event the other day and somebody said, oh, ASEAN, and they just started rattling off the capitals and they weren't working in the, I was very proud that somebody outside of our field kind of knew a bit about ASEAN. And then the other thing I think is more interesting is ASEAN and people from ASEAN, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, are more present and active in the United States and around the world, right? It used to be, I think in 1994 when I first went to Indonesia, I was like, have I ever met an Indonesian in the U.S.? And it was just sort of like, it just didn't seem to be, there didn't seem to be that interchange. So I think it's very healthy, all of the things that are happening, between universities and businesses, building these ties, people-to-people ties that lead to business ties, government-to-government ties. I won't go through the facts in this report. I mean, I think any of us can open up a page and say, what's the relevance of Kentucky to ASEAN? Right, we already covered that this morning, and the trade and the investment. But I just want to go back to the idea of like this is a core. This study done every 2 years in cooperation with the East-West Center and the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute, in Singapore. Is very important. I think it's a benchmark that's used. People use it in speeches, people use it when they visit the region, and I'm just proud to have this partnership, and I look forward to the rest of the program. So thank you very much, Satu.
Thank you very much, Mike. We're now going to hear from the director of the ISEAS Institute, Mr. Troy, and he'll join us in just a moment on video, as well as the president of the East-West. They've recorded some of our
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome and greetings from the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. I'm honored to welcome you to the official launch of the 7th edition of ASEAN Matters for America, America Matters for ASEAN. This publication marks our long-term partnership with the East-West Center and the US-ASEAN Business Council. It reflects our shared belief in promoting a good understanding of the dynamic and multifaceted relations between the ASEAN region and the United States, as well as the importance of this relationship to both sides. Over nearly 5 decades, ASEAN-US relations have evolved into one of the most comprehensive partnerships among ASEAN's dialogue partners, resulting in the establishment of the ASEAN-US Comprehensive Strategic Partnership in 2022. Together, both sides have built a strong foundation of engagement, ranging from traditional areas such as trade, security, and education, to emerging areas such as digital transformation, sustainable development, climate resilience, energy transition, health security, and also the important area of innovation. These expanding areas of cooperation underscore our shared vision for a future that is both inclusive, resilient, and forward-looking. However, we meet today in an era of profound economic and geopolitical change. The world is grappling with rapid technological disruptions and global economic volatility, set against a backdrop of intensifying tensions and competition. Amid these challenges, it is vital for us not to lose sight of the strengths that we bring to each other and even look for new opportunities to deepen our relationship with each other in this new era. ASEAN as a region has almost 700 million people. It ranks 5th globally in terms of economic size and remains one of the fastest growing regions going forward. Today, it is already the 4th largest export market for US goods and the #1 destination for US investments in the Indo-Pacific. This symbiotic relationship works in reverse as well, because ASEAN counts as the US as its 2nd largest trading partner and also are avid consumers of US technology and services. Security-wise, the US has had a stabilizing influence and presence in the region for a long time, and its continued presence in ASEAN is vital and appreciated. Its commitment to ASEAN centrality and its support for the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific also complement ASEAN's own efforts to maintain peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Beyond this, ASEAN and the US are actively collaborating across a wide spectrum of areas, from disaster management and public health to the promotion and protection of the rights of women and children, education, and youth development. Both sides are also working together on strengthening cooperation on cybersecurity issues, maritime security, and transnational crime, while also advancing efforts on human capital development. We believe that the publication of ASEAN Matters for America, America Matters for ASEAN, continues to play an important role in highlighting these interconnections. The 7th edition provides up-to-date and relevant data on ASEAN-US relations that policymakers, researchers, and the general public should be aware of as we strengthen this vital partnership in the years to come. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partners from the East-West Center and the US-ASEAN Business Council for working closely with the ISEAS team. I wish everyone who is present at this launch a very good day.
Just want to say ISEAS has been a terrific partner for us over the years, and because it plays such a central role in the region, it's really great to work with them and their team, and they have eyes on this product as well as USABC, and look through all the data, look through all the wording, and so sometimes there's some negotiations.
On behalf of the East-West Center, I am delighted to announce the launch of the 7th edition of the ASEAN Matters for America and America Matters for ASEAN series. It's a pleasure to know that our partners, diplomats, business leaders, and scholars, many in the audience today, are deeply invested in the future of US-ASEAN relations. Your engagement is what makes this partnership real and enduring. This latest edition builds on a long collaboration, tracking and illuminating the partnership between the United States, ASEAN, and how it continues to grow and adapt to new challenges, from digital innovation to regional supply chain resilience. This report serves as a reminder of what's possible when nations work together. It also highlights opportunities for deeper cooperation in trade, investment, employment, business, security, tourism, education, and people-to-people connections. Understanding the robust, dynamic relationship between the United States and ASEAN is one of increasing importance to both Americans and the people who make up the nations of ASEAN. I'll share just a few of the statistics here. ASEAN trade and investment supports over 714,000 jobs across the United States. ASEAN is the #1 destination for US investment in the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN visitors add $6.9 billion to the US economy annually. ASEAN is also the 4th largest importer of US food and agricultural exports. And ASEAN students contribute over $2.1 billion to the US economy annually, including more than 13 million in my home state of Hawaii. These numbers tell a compelling story, but behind each one are real people, entrepreneurs, students, farmers, innovators, and travelers, whose lives are shaped by the exchanges between our two regions. Every statistic represents a bridge of understanding and shared opportunity. And in today's rapidly evolving global landscape, economic security has become an essential pillar of American and regional stability. This report underscores how deeply the economies of the United States and ASEAN are intertwined, and how economic growth, transparent investment, and stable supply chains across the region strengthens not just prosperity, but also peace and security. This report also tells a story of mutual growth and shared purpose. The ties between the United States and ASEAN are not just economic, they're human, built on decades of friendship, learning, and trust. And as we look to the future, that foundation will continue to support peace, prosperity, and resilience across our region. Our sincere thanks to the US-ASEAN Business Council and the Yusof Ishak Institute for their continued partnership and leadership on this effort. Our ongoing collaboration ensures that this work remains rigorous, relevant, and accessible to policymakers, business leaders, and citizens alike. Thank you all for joining us today and for your ongoing support of this important partnership. Together, we can continue to demonstrate that when the United States and ASEAN work hand in hand, both sides and the broader region benefit in lasting ways. Thank you.
Before we get to our two keynote speakers, I've thanked US-ASEAN Business Council, represented here by Brian McFeeters, and of course, Mr. Choi and the ISEAS Institute in Singapore. But I want to thank the staff of the US-ASEAN in Washington, particularly Carissa Young, who's, step out, Carissa, who not only put together this program with our USABC colleagues, but took the lead in the bulk. As I said, it's a cooperative, negotiated effort, but took the lead in the data, the writing of the text, et cetera. I really want to thank you. And Jeanette Simmons, Jeanette is somewhere here.
She's outside.
Oh, she's outside, but you met her when she was coming in. She's our designer. And Brian may not remember, but the first version of it, and please remember the context. This is when we had signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. And when ASEAN was sometimes confused with Asian. Mm-hmm. And people really, sort of, if you're not in the field, why would you know? And I wish I could show you the original publication. There's only a few versions left. And in fact, I'm thinking of reprinting. It was a large poster board that was then folded in on itself with various infographics on it. Because we didn't have any sponsors or funders for it, and we were trying to create a product just to be accessible as to why we were signing the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, what our country's stakes and interests and relationships were. And it has evolved since. So I just want to say that people like Carissa and Jeanette and the whole team at US-ASEAN in Washington has been responsible, along with our sponsors and our partners, for evolving this product into what you see today, as well as the website. So thank you very much, Carissa. Now it gives me absolute great pleasure to have two very distinguished folks with us to give keynote remarks. Our first speaker is Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Southeast Asia and ASEAN Affairs, Hunt Vandertroll. Congressman Case is here. Could we pause for a moment? You've been on the Hill.
I'm a former staffer. I know he's got to go.
You know how this works.
You listen to him. How long is he going?
There's a catch. There's a catch. So, if you have a time schedule, we'd love to have you on first, Congressman Case, because we know that you've got a very busy schedule. For those of you who don't know, Congressman Case is the Hawaii 1 member and also serves on the Congressional Caucus for ASEAN. He holds a number of very critical posts in Congress and is engaged in very much in East-West Center's activities and programs, and we're delighted that you were able to find time on this busy morning to join us. Please, Congressman Case. This might be an easier path. Just like that. Great. Yeah, sure.
Morning, aloha to everybody. It's good to be with you all here. Very briefly, I'm going to keep my remarks pretty short because I'd much rather take some questions if you'd like to get into anything with me, and I'm not sure how much time we have. It's really excellent to join you again. It's great to be back with my East-West Center, which is 65 years. Is that where you are now? 65 years of just really being at the center of this part of our world. The center, obviously, headquartered in my district, which I'm very proud of, and the Institute very thankful to that. I don't think Celeste is here, right? I saw her wandering around on social media on the East Coast this week, so I thought she's going to be here. And it is great to celebrate this coming out of the 7th edition of ASEAN Matters for the United States. It's been a great series, and I was reflecting when I was getting ready to come down here and talk to you and kind of checking out the background. That the first edition was in 2010. The first edition 15 years ago, yet consider the changes in our world, in the Indo-Pacific, and in ASEAN, just in the last 15 years. So I had it in mind to go back and actually read that first edition and see what it was talking about. Because just 15 years ago, of course, ASEAN was much smaller, as the world was for that matter. The Indo-Pacific wasn't as challenged as it is today. And we certainly didn't have the level of trade either inside of ASEAN or between ASEAN and the United States, or for that matter with the PRC. So there was a lot of things that were different about the world 15 years ago. And of course, that's then and this is now. We've seen just a number of things that have happened. ASEAN, of course, has continued to expand. Congratulations on the most recent edition. That's really great news. Third largest population in the world. That's no surprise because ASEAN has been growing for some time and will continue to grow. And obviously the trading side of it for ASEAN has continued to escalate over the years. The depth of the relationship between ASEAN and the United States, for example, the depth of the relationships with ASEAN just internal to ASEAN in terms of the trading that has gone on in ASEAN. So tremendous change over the last 15 years, and change is not going to slow. This is, as we all know, the most challenging, the most dynamic, the most interesting part of our world, the Indo-Pacific writ large, and the ASEAN countries sitting in the middle of the Indo-Pacific amidst countries such as India and obviously China, Japan, the United States, Australia, really, really critical. And the future of ASEAN really will be the future of the Indo-Pacific in a broad sense. And that's a future that we don't know what that's going to look like. It could go a lot of different directions, and we're not sure exactly where that's going to go. I think that there are a couple of things I can talk to you about that are kind of, I guess, mega questions, I would put it, for ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific, again, writ large. I think, obviously, what is facing us all now is some kind of a mega shift in international relations that is prompted by, but not exclusively caused by, the administration of President Trump. Obviously, Mr. Trump came into office as a disruptor in the international stage as well as in our country, responding, I think, to domestic political issues inside of our country, a fundamental question after 3 generations of leadership in the post-war world as to whether we were going to continue to be or a leader of the international rules-based order, or whether we were going to retrench to Fortress America and try to hang ourselves here. That's how it's been presented openly, and I think it is obviously not quite that simple. We're dealing with a lot of different things that are going on around the world. We're dealing with changing international politics, international dynamics around the world, and that's manifesting itself in our political dynamic right here in the United States, and it's obviously causing a shift in our foreign affairs. Where that's going to end up, I'm not sure. I mean, clearly, Mr. Trump came in for 6 months. We saw tremendous dislocation in trade relationships. We saw, obviously, a tremendous withdrawal in terms of non-defense assistance. We saw questioning of partnerships and alliances. We saw some questioning of whether our country was continuing to commit on the security side of the equation. And so these things all came at us pretty fast the first 6 to 9 months, and of course we're not too much farther than the 9 months. I will say though, in the same breath, that if you take a look at it, some things are, I think, starting to emerge a little bit clearer at this point. The first thing that I think is starting to emerge, and you may not have noticed, but it is true, Congress has its own mind on this, on a bipartisan relationship, bipartisan perspective. We certainly have not really altered in terms of the overall security commitment. Indo-PACOM, which is in my district, continues to be just as engaged in the Indo-Pacific as it always was, continues to participate very fully in joint military exercises with many of the ASEAN countries. Of course, we have partners and allies in ASEAN proper. And so I think the questions as to whether we were somehow walking away from the Indo-Pacific and ASEAN in terms of security, I think those questions or those concerns are pretty much answered at this point. I don't see any real change in that, and I sit on the House Appropriations Subcommittee where we continue to fund fully amidst a more constrained budget elsewhere, and even expand our security commitments to that region. And so I think that part of it, I think, is a little bit clearer. Trade is obviously not quite as clear. We're clearly going through a tremendous dislocation in terms of trading relationships between the U.S. And the countries of the Indo-Pacific, including ASEAN. Congress thinks that the president, on a bipartisan basis, by the way, thinks that the president does not have unilateral tariff authority. We're going to see whether the Supreme Court of the United States answers that question one way or the other. But I think Congress has tried to reassert itself in terms of trade and tariffs. And then finally, I think if you take a look at development assistance, which was a very radical change from prior administrations, Republican and Democrat, we certainly have not, I think, found our kind of next chapters of security assistance in a post-US-AID world. And by the way, I'm a full supporter of development assistance, so I completely disagree with the direction of this administration in this direction, in this area. Now, what does that all mean kind of for our relationship, right? So first of all, the security relationship is going to stay strong. In fact, it's going to expand. We are expanding security arrangements with many of the countries of ASEAN right now. That's number one. Number two, I think trade and tariffs and those kinds of issues are going to stabilize over the next year or so. I don't know what they're going to stabilize to look like. And then number three, I think we're going to find another chapter of development assistance. So the relationship between the U.S. and by the way, we're going to continue to trade with each other, and the United States is going to continue to be the largest, investor outside of our country in ASEAN, which is the case. So I don't think that the dynamic of what's going on with the PRC is changing much. That consensus remains, and that has consequences for ASEAN in terms of friendshoring, for example, in terms of foreign investment from our country. I think that will continue. I think for ASEAN, this means a couple of different things. And this is true of some of the rest of the world. I think, first of all, in the security area, clearly, I think rightly, are asking the rest of the world to step up their own security arrangements, because I think we, on both sides of the aisle, and the American people, do believe we've been carrying too much of the relative burden of defense around the world. And so we will see the ASEAN countries step up that, and that will be good for everybody, number one. Number two, I think what we will see as well is a increased level of trade within the ASEAN countries, among the ASEAN countries, through multilateral trade agreements, such as are going on in the Pacific right now, where we may not be a direct participant. We're obviously going to be trading, but clearly there needs to be some resilience in terms of the trading arrangements, so that we're not so much dependent on each other. I speak more from an ASEAN perspective than a U.S. perspective. And then finally, development assistance, where I think you will simply see other countries such as Australia, such as New Zealand, such as Japan, step up their own development assistance, especially, and the ASEAN countries, obviously, who provide a lot of development assistance throughout the region, especially to the Pacific Islands, especially to some of the other countries of the Indo-Pacific. And so these are just kind of some of the broad themes that I think are out there. I think the bottom line is that, yes, ASEAN matters to the United States very, very much. That's a bipartisan consensus. And in a time of real change in our country, as we sort out what our next chapters are going to be, this relationship is not going to go away. I think it's going to get actually stronger and more important. I'm going to stop there and see if you have any quick questions.
The floor is open, so maybe you're thinking of a question, but I have one for Congressman, because you and I have interacted often on our country's relations with Pacific Island states. So I was thinking about your perspective on some of the things ASEAN can do as a group to make the case for ASEAN as a grouping, as the Pacific Island countries have done, whether through PIF or through their interactions with Congress. And relatedly, as a member of the ASEAN caucus, are there some things that the ASEAN caucus would like to prioritize as we go forward? So those are my two questions, and then invite others to think of something.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have focused in Congress on the Pacific Islands themselves. So the island countries and jurisdictions of other countries within the Pacific itself. So I'm not talking about the rim countries. I'm talking about, Papua New Guinea and Tuvalu and Fiji and Samoa, countries that are really and have a real similarity with ASEAN, by the way, because ASEAN obviously has a lot of land to it. But if you take a look at countries of ASEAN, waters of ASEAN are huge. And this is the case with the Pacific Islands as well. So we are talking not just about things like minerals and mining and timber and resource utilization on land. We're talking about fishing. We're talking about the maritime domain awareness. These are things that are in common among those countries. I think Pacific Islands have done a really, really good job of banding together in the face of external questions and challenges to really develop a very much better than many other places in the world, a multilateral structure where they can hang together. And they have differences like everybody else. The ASEAN countries have differences. ASEAN countries have some territorial disputes that are left over from a long time ago, so they say nothing new. But I think the model that followed is a good one, and obviously ASEAN is a model similar to that, which is perhaps more grounded in trade, at least at its genesis, but can certainly move beyond that to a far more multilateral, collective approach to issues such as climate change, such as joint development assistance, which I think is the second part of your question, which is where can ASEAN enter into the picture there. And I think if I look at the Pacific Islands countries, certainly we see countries that are leaders in this world, but in tremendous amount of development assistance. And as the United States steps away from that stage, at least in some way, shapes, and forms, other countries need to fill that gap, which is in their own strategic interest. It's not just a matter of generosity out there in the world. It is also a matter of maintaining an Indo-Pacific that is free, that is open, that is everything we've striven for collectively over the last 3 generations. And all of that is a threat in the geopolitical world.
Barbara, and then we have Ambassador Patrick Campbell after as well.
Thank you, Patrick. You mentioned Congress stepping up on trade. I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate on those comments and what role you see through the rest of this administration, Congress playing trade issues.
Well, I think first of all, even though from the external view of things, Democrats in Congress are unilaterally opposed to the Trump administration, the Republicans are unilaterally cowed by the Trump administration, so that there's no effective check and balance. And in many areas that actually is unfortunate, so it's not a good time for politics. But if you take a look at foreign affairs, you dig underneath the surface, and you take a look at what's actually going on in the discussions and the bills, in the joint efforts, in things like bipartisan congressional delegations. I think I read in your presentation, there's been like 21 congressional delegations. I've been a couple of times now in the last couple of years. There's actually a lot more going on there. A couple of the questions I've already kind of alluded to. Number one, what is the next generation of development assistance? We're not going to do US-ASEAN directly yet. What are we going to be doing? Millennium Challenge Corporation, Development Finance Corporation. Is it a more means-tested US-AID approach? And there's a lot of those discussions going on with the administration, by the way, pretty much behind the scenes of the 24-hour news cycle or whatever it is nowadays, a 1-hour news cycle. So that's one area. Trade, I think trade, a lot of that depends obviously on what the Supreme Court says. Because if in fact the president can unilaterally set tariff and trade policy for our country, then I'm not sure Congress has a whole bunch of a role or a willingness necessarily to lead in that area, at least under the current majority. And so if the Supreme Court says, obviously it's your job too, then we've got a whole different approach there. And I think what we're really looking for is and I think this is true, whether this is a matter of the Trump administration's approach to trade, or certainly on a pretty bipartisan basis, Congress's is much more of a linkage between trade and security. So trade with your friends, but if somebody's out there bashing you in the world and causing you harm, then why should you enhance their economic position, right? So I think we're definitely seeing far more of a confluence in both the administration and in Congress on a bipartisan basis in terms of trade. So I would see that there would be a natural evolution to much more of a US-Australia trade-related kind of structure where it's a big picture relationship, right? It's security, it's trade, it's economy, it's joint efforts out there in the world on development assistance, it's working with each other on the international stage, et cetera, et cetera.
And we have Ambassador Piper Campbell also.
Representative Case, thank you so much for coming in. I have a question about higher education. So I currently teach at American University. We are proud to host the ASEAN and Indo-Pacific Studies Initiative. And as you certainly know, there was a 17% decrease in international students attending higher education in the States this year. I wondered about your thoughts in terms of what Congress can do, both to send a credible message to international students, especially students from Southeast Asia, that they are welcome in the United States, and also to infuse into what is a really highly charged conversation about immigration, the idea or the recognition of the value to the United States of having students from places like Southeast Asia attending universities here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm from Hawaii. We do international education in Hawaii. We have a tremendous population of international students at any one time. We've been just as dissipated as anybody else. So clearly, there's a couple of things going on. This administration came in, intent in a couple of areas. The first area was to reduce federal support for education writ large, and higher education specifically, and international education. So we're dealing with a macro question of how much the federal government should spend anywhere. And that's a legitimate question to have. I happen to disagree with kind of how we've gone about answering the question, but I think it's a legitimate question, and that's not going to go away. What is the value of the federal investment in international education? I think there's a value there. Some other people don't. So that's one thing that's going on. We're right in the middle of that debate right now. And you rightly alluded to immigration, where we have not answered the big picture question of what we want the next generation of immigration to look like. What is the kind of immigration that we want? Under what conditions? And we're talking not just about a path to citizenship through permanent residence, et cetera. We are talking about foreign travel into the United States for legitimate purposes that our country values, for example, economics. For example, and East-West Center is a beautiful example of this. All of those East-West Center alums that have gone back to leave their country, 30,000, what's it? 60,000 people out there, mostly in the Indo-Pacific, that have spent some time in the United States in my district and understand our country and they're leaving our country. So I think there's a tremendous value, but it's a debate that we have to have. We're having the same debate over business-related immigration right now, say 20 visas, for example. So, I know where I stand. The administration, I think, wrongly came in with a blunt instrument to deal with an issue that needed to be dealt with, but has not really found the next generation of discussion on that. And I think that, again, perhaps a little bit like the overall relationship between the United States and the Pacific, or the world for that matter, after a highly confusing, highly dislocating, highly concerning first 9 or 10 or 11 months now, maybe we can actually get down to discussing some of these issues in a real way, decide what our trade policy should be, what our immigration policy should be, what the level of federal spending for education should be. And I think we're actually going there. I think we're actually, our political system is capable of adjustment and capable of flexibility, and perhaps we're seeing some of that.
Anyone else have a question? Congressman, well, thank you so much for coming. Well, it's tough enough to get folks on a busy schedule who are members of Congress here, but not only was Congressman Case generous enough with his comments, but took time to answer questions. Really appreciate it, and always appreciate your support to the East-West Center and to our work. We were just about to go into the two keynote remarks, so let me introduce those two speakers to you. We have Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Southeast Asia and ASEAN Affairs, Hunt Vanderkolk, and as he was saying before Congressman Case came on, he is a former Hill staffer both at Senator McConnell's office and with Congressman Andy Barr of Kentucky, so he knows how these things go, and thank you for your forbearance in delaying your comments, but we're delighted to have you here. I know you've been very busy on the ASEAN and Southeast Asia front, so we welcome your comments first, and then we'll turn to Ambassador Malaysia.
Good morning. Well, yes, as Satu was saying, as a former Hill staffer, I spent 6 years in this building, so I've done many events in here. And so, Congressman Case, thanks for jumping ahead on that. It goes as well for your staff, because I know how hard it is to keep a congressman on track during the day. I do want to just note on something. I'm glad Congressman Case brought it up, but this helpful booklet here tells it. To the United States and to the administration, just a full stop, in a bipartisan manner, ASEAN Matters, right? So I just want a full stop, for the administration, for the State Department, ASEAN Matters, the United States. I think you saw Secretary Rubio go out twice this year. Obviously, got President Trump recently at the Leaders Summit on that, and just as a real point to show the commitment that the administration, Secretary Rubio, and the State Department have to the United States relationship with ASEAN. So just kind of at the topper, and I've got sort of more remarks on my but just building off the Congressman Case's point on that. And then I think that just a second on kind of get into that on assistance. So really what foreign assistance looks like in the administration. And so, I think we all read the headlines that we saw what was being put out on U.S. assistance, foreign assistance to ASEAN countries specifically. And I just want to focus on assistance has not gone away. I think there was a realignment on what assistance looks like for the current administration. Not that last administration people were doing bad things. It's just you have a new administration with different priorities, and so it's time to realign those. And so we went through that process at the start of this administration on looking at where are U.S. tax dollars going, where they align with our kind of strategic needs. And actually, the first country that we really saw the new model for assistance was actually the Philippines. So when President Marcos came for his visit with President Trump, we turned on about $63 million in economic support funds for the Luzon Economic Corridor. And what you're really seeing, which actually was preceded by countries like Australia, was taking foreign assistance, but then also our strategic priorities within the State Department and melding them together. So it wasn't, I know we saw USA away, but we moved a lot of those capabilities into the State Department. So from my office, quite literally, I share a wall with our DAS. I call him checkbook man. But he's the one that runs foreign assistance. And so I will tell you, for these several months, how helpful it has been when we are trying, for Thailand capability of peace deal, for other Philippines visit, you name it, especially in ASEAN, to be able to look within the East Asia Pacific Bureau and say, what can we turn on, right? And it's not, what can we turn on internally? So within EAP is we are kind of custodians at state of the bilateral relationship with countries, for my remit, for Southeast Asia. Okay, what is it that these countries are needing, or what is it we have kind of in our hopper that we see moving in the same direction? So Just want to also hopefully for some clarity, I appreciate Congressman Cates, raising that. But that's kind of where at least we're thinking EAPs for foreign assistance. So it's not a withdrawal. I think it was a realignment, which happens every administration. But I have personally heartened that ASEAN though is going to kind of the tip of the spear of how are we going to do foreign assistance? It's going to, for ASEAN. And so again, like kind of underscoring our commitment and how important ASEAN is to the United States in the relationship. And as well, just noted this book is great. I used to really keep this at my desk. So I was at the rollout in Kuala Lumpur. And so great to do it twice, and I saw Celeste again on video. But this is such a great product, and so again, congratulations to staff at Collegium who did a lot of work in writing this, the East-West Center, and Yusof Ishak Institute, et cetera, for it's a super helpful resource, and I still use it over the state, and even as a full staff, we definitely use that. But so I'll kind of with that top row, I'll hop in. But really, Mr. Charul of Malaysia, who's become a great friend of mine since he's been in the chair. So just want to welcome him as well. Professor Brian Peters, as well at USABC. So I had the opportunity to see Brian, and so I was over, like I said, in KL for President Trump's leaders meeting. It was originally a 4-day trip to work on the Cambodia peace deal that turned into a 3.5-week trip in Kuala Lumpur. So I now call it kind of my home away from home. I think after about week 2.5, I started to look at maybe condos in the area. That's why we get the IHG for a little too much longer. But it was great being in Malaysia, and just want to really congratulate Malaysia on a fantastic chair year. I know President Trump and President Anwar. I don't know if I've seen any of the ASEAN leader get the president to dance on the tarmac. And so I really underscoring that personal relationship the Prime Minister and the President have made. So again, thank you for that. And to our Philippine friends, really excited to work with the Philippines in their upcoming ASEAN year, chair year again. I got to be there for Rubio, President Marcos' meetings that I know. They have a long friendship, and so we're excited to work with the Philippines as well. We're excited for the year to come. So with that, again, it's my privilege to address you all today at the launch of the significant products here in Washington, D.C. Like I said, in October, I was into the launch earlier this year for the ASEAN Matters 7th edition. So again, congratulations to everyone that has done it. So we know, thanks to this product, that ASEAN member states had a combined GDP of $4 trillion, and the grouping has the world's 3rd largest labor force with 385 million people under the age of 35. Geographically, we understand the importance of the ASEAN region, which straddles sea lanes through which 1/3 of global shipping passes every year. We know ASEAN is the 4th largest export market for American goods, with almost 37,000 companies across the United States exporting to ASEAN and creating more than 668,000 jobs for Americans. And I think in the middle line here, I was heartened. I'm from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It seems I think since 2019, Kentucky was the #1 in growth for ASEAN trade. So we want to up that a bit. We get a lot of trade in Kentucky from our relationship with Japan, Toyota. And so for ASEAN, that was really heartened that the road coming out was so high. ASEAN countries supply nearly half of all U.S. chip imports. And Southeast Asia, as we all know, has a significant critical minerals resources that plays a unique role, an important role in global supply chains. All this is more is why President Trump and Secretary Rubio's first trips to Southeast Asia were for the ASEAN meetings. And again, it was a fantastic trip in time for Kuala Lumpur. So congratulations to Malaysia on such a successful chair year. During his meetings with ASEAN leaders, President Trump underscored the importance of the region as home to critical allies and partners in commerce, common security, peace, and stability, and reaffirmed our shared commitment to addressing regional and global challenges. He also reaffirmed U.S. intention to remain a strong friend, partner of ASEAN for generations to come, including through our comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN. That is why one of the most significant outcomes of the President's time in Malaysia is the adoption of the ASEAN-U.S. Joint Vision Statement for a stronger, safer, more prosperous ASEAN and America. The statement will serve as a roadmap for our comprehensive strategic partnership in the years ahead, especially as we approach, which I'm very excited about, the 50th anniversary of U.S.-ASEAN relations in 2027. The joint statement outlines key priorities to enhance the shared safety, strength, and prosperity of America and ASEAN's combined, for ASEAN's combined 1 billion people, the United States is 1 billion people. To make it safer, we are prioritizing cooperation on combined online scams, improving disaster management, and strengthening maritime security. To make it stronger, we're focused on promoting good governance, fostering public-private partnerships, and advancing technology cooperation. To make us more prosperous, We're emphasizing fair two-way trade, investment, strengthening the supply chain resilience, and collaborating on the digital economy, AI, and energy. We're taking concrete steps that the United States will now announce at the summits, so we have plenty of follow-up after the president's visit. First, the United States has renewed its support for the ASEAN Single Window Initiative, which has been instrumental in facilitating trade across ASEAN, which, if counted as a single economy, which we all know, would be the world's 5th largest. With U.S. support, ASEAN Single Window has saved U.S. and ASEAN businesses over $9 billion by reducing customs processing times and enabling faster and more affordable movement of goods. Working with Congress, the United States will provide $2 million to upgrade the ASEAN Single Window platform for enhanced interoperability and security. And this ensures that U.S. businesses remain competitive in Southeast Asia. As explained in the ASEAN Matters booklet, there we go, this one paragraph there. Over the past 2 years, State Department, in partnership with U.S. industry, the U.S.-ASEAN Business Council, is proud to have provided key technical support. The ASEAN Digital Economy Framework agreements resulted in substantial conclusion in late October. As explained in the booklet, DEFA could double the value of ASEAN's digital economy to $2 trillion by 2030. The United States is also ready to work with ASEAN to meet the challenge of growing its energy supply to provide greater economic security. Our policy is that the energy should be abundant, reliable, affordable, and secure. We will continue to support ASEAN's efforts to expand the ASEAN power grid, connectivity to ensure reliability and stability. And we'll work with ASEAN to support options such as LNG, civil nuclear energy, geothermal, and coal. Again, as a Kentuckian, I know that coal and clean coal energy particularly is something we're looking to export, particularly in Southeast Asia, to meet certain energy needs. We're proud as well to support the development of ASEAN's mining development vision, which is priority economic deliverable during the ASEAN and Malaysian shared here. The United States seeks to expand opportunities for investment in energy and critical minerals, both directions, working closely with the U.S. private sector. Again, something for you with Malaysia we're very pleased about. So again, just want to underscore that President Trump's visits and Rubio's visits here, I mean, we were over the moon with the deliverables that we got bilaterally with Malaysia, with other countries, and just the meeting power that we had meeting at ASEAN. And so hopefully, we'll look at, these bilateral trade deals, I think often the tariff aspect is kind of the stiffer price that you get on a lot of things, but a lot of other ways, though, for U.S. businesses, many businesses here, I think a major line of effort for the trade negotiations that were also non-tariff barriers. And so for U.S. businesses operating in ASEAN countries, what can we kind of get some of those friction points, right? And it's not that, that many ASEAN countries are like, we don't want U.S. businesses, but often, many U.S. businesses operating in ASEAN, it's like, hey, this has been kind of a sticky issue for many years. I think using the larger kind of economic conversation is the goal to really make ASEAN a more hospitable place for U.S. businesses. So yes, there's a tariff issue, and I very clearly understand kind of the political aspect of that. The other aspects that we really need to give the opportunity to raise with ASEAN host governments, the opportunity of hey, this is an issue for U.S. businesses. This is something that's kind of in the way of U.S. businesses investing more capital, employing more people in ASEAN. And so again, it's kind of an opportunity for us to kind of raise those conversations and again make it a more level playing field for U.S. businesses in the region. So all that to say, there is robust engagement from the United States, from our State Department, working with all of our ASEAN partners here. ASEAN Matters, that is a full stop statement right there. It matters to the United States. And so I have a great opportunity. I love my job, right? I get to work with all you, I get to work with Mr. Rule, all working with the ASEAN ambassadors here in the United States. It is just such an amazing crew, and I think has so much potential going forward. And so again, I think it will work for us both. I'm probably over time on that, but thank you all very much for having me today. And again, the congratulations to everyone on this product. It is incredible. I know this is number 7, so many more additions to come as the list grows and changes. So thank you.
Well, I know that Deputy Assistant Secretary said he might have to look for a condo, but I have to say, when I heard that you were there for 3.5 weeks working Southeast Asia and ASEAN Canada, I was delighted at the administration's engagement. It was wonderful that we have that level of engagement. Speaking of ASEAN and the chairmanship of ASEAN this year, we are delighted and privileged to have with us Ambassador His Excellency Tan Sri Muhammad Shalom Ikram Yaakob. He's no stranger to the United States, having served his country at the Permanent Mission of the United Nations. He was also Secretary General of the entire Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Malaysia, so he has deep and extensive experience. And as we were discussing earlier, I had the pleasure of being with you both in October and in November at the invitation of the Foreign Ministry. So I really saw how successful ASEAN chairmanship here in Malaysia put together. So we're delighted to welcome you to Summer Congress.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is tough to talk after listening to you, after listening to Congressman Case earlier on, and of course after listening to my good friend, Ambassador, of course, Ambassador Peters, Prime Peters. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me this morning to talk a little bit about why ASEAN matters to the US. I think that is stated already. ASEAN matters to the US, and US matters to ASEAN. The question is, how do we move forward in putting together the ingredients to further strengthen those relations? My perception here is that after being this is the 5th month being ambassador of ASEAN to the US, this is my perception, maybe right or wrong. I think my perception here is that ASEAN is still not much on the radar of at least people, on the weekend. I mean, this is my perception. I think when you talk about not ASEAN or Asian, I think first few countries will come to the minds, to the radar of most people here on the hill. China, Japan, Korea, North Korea, and Taiwan perhaps. But of course, those people, gentlemen and ladies who have some connection with ASEAN, they know ASEAN matters to the US. But the rest, I guess, is just like going through the motion. They know, relatively it is important. But this is my perception: is that the countries I mentioned earlier on, the 4 or 5 Asian countries, kind of immediately will be on their mind. What does it mean? What it means is that ASEAN ambassadors here in DC will have a lot of work to do, and we also have to rely on friends of ASEAN to also kind of do that pitching for us. I also want to mention that ASEAN is now 11th under our chairmanship. Timor-Leste was admitted as the 11th member of ASEAN. And now I would like to, refer a little bit to my notes, my draft. As I mentioned earlier on, the question before us today is simple: why does ASEAN matter to the US? The answer actually is very simple. To me, it is the linchpin to the Indo-Pacific's future. What it means is that a future that is inextricably linked to American security, prosperity, and core values. And I don't think that it is wise not to pay attention to ASEAN. We always look at it from 3 perspectives. It's just like under the comprehensive strategic partnership between the US and ASEAN members of ASEAN. That is from the economic and trade perspective, from the security, strategic defense perspective, and then from people-to-people contact. I don't want to go through under each pillar of this. Perhaps I'll just touch a little bit because it has been said by you, Dr. Satu, and of course by Han, and of course in the book. It's all there. I mean, the facts are all there. But again, As you know that ASEAN provides a massive food market with a combined GDP approaching $3.6 trillion, fifth largest economy. By 2030, it is projected to be the fourth, a block of over 680 million people, young people, majority, rapidly urbanizing and increasingly consumer-driven. On trade and investment, ASEAN is collectively the US fourth largest trading partner. American companies has invested over 350 billion in the region. Even in Malaysia alone, more than 700 American companies are having their operation in Malaysia, and they are making really good money. The supply chain resilience, you talk about semiconductor. We are a good single production base. We believe that we are central to our strategy of de-risking in building resilient, diversified supply chains, particularly with critical sectors like semiconductors, electronics, medical equipment. These are all been mentioned earlier on. In terms of political centrality, we always believe in ASEAN centrality. We have the convening power, as earlier on mentioned. And then we have this ASEAN's institution, the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, and the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, or ADMM Plus. To us, this is a very useful platform where US, China, Russia, India, Japan, and others converge. It may be termed as like a talk shop, but we believe that by talking to each other within this platform, including these major powers, it's very useful when we talk about trying to create a more stable and prosperous environment, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Maritime security. The vast majority of global trade, including substantial portion of American foreign goods, transits the vital sea lanes of South China Sea and Malacca Strait. And we are the front line, guardians of these lanes. It is therefore important for US, ASEAN to work together to upholding freedom of navigation and the rules-based maritime order against some aggressive or unwanted behaviors in that part. And then we believe that we are the strategic partner. ASEAN nations collectively represent a diverse, sovereign, and resilient group of states committed to non-alignment. And unified ASEAN prevents any single major power to take or to undertake unwanted or unnecessary action in that area, and thereby preserving the balance of power that is fundamental to American interests in the Pacific. And then people to people, I think that's low off the cuff. We are behind time. If we look at people to people contact, even in Malaysia alone, more than 200,000 Malaysian students have graduated from American universities. This is an asset as we look to the future for both ASEAN and Malaysia in that case to work together with the US. I welcome. And we look into the future, you see the most significant achievement under our chairmanship of ASEAN 2025 is actually the adoptions of that document, ASEAN 2045. Why it is important? Because it charts the way forward, 20 years forward. And it looks into not just the traditional areas of cooperation between ASEAN and developed partners, of course, including the US, but also those critical areas such as AI, cybersecurity, digital economy, and so on and so forth. So the potential is huge there, because this is where American companies have the edge, have the advantage over companies from other countries, and this is where I believe that the US should take advantage of. And I guess I've I've spoken, long enough. Let me just conclude by saying that ASEAN Matters to the US because our partnership is not only essential to the peace, prosperity, and stability of the Indo-Pacific, but also the well-being of the United States itself. It directly linked to a secure trading sea lane, thriving supply chains, and a region where nations, large and small, can prosper without coercion. ASEAN is the strategic, economic, and diplomatic enabler that helps to sustain this environment. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for being here and giving those remarks. And you make a great case for why we're engaged in ASEAN. And again, congratulations on Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship here. We were going to go to the fireside chat, but we're just delighted to have with us Representative Ami Bera from California. Many of you will know he's the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on East Asia and Pacific. He has graced the East-West Center's programs many times, whether on the Pacific Islands, on Southeast Asia, or on Asia, and we're delighted to welcome you again for your remarks.
Thank you for inviting me. I know you'll hear from, I think you're going to hear from my partner, the chairwoman on the subcommittee, Congresswoman Tim, shortly. It is not a partisan issue. Again, I appreciate the work that the East-West Center does on this, and the presence on the Hill. Obviously, we work closely with the Southeast Asian and ASEAN embassies and their ambassadors and presence here. And many of us have traveled to most of the countries in Southeast Asia. ASEAN does matter to the United States, and the United States matters to ASEAN. And it's not a choice here. You're in a neighborhood with two big countries, the United States and China. I talk a lot about ASEAN centrality, Southeast Asian nations, and looking at them for the real opportunities, vibrant young populations, growing economies, real opportunities when we think about supply chain redundancy and opportunities. But we do have to create a rules-based order, something that's predictable for US companies and other companies, Japan, Korea, European companies, investing there. And the ambassador just talked about this can't be based on coercion. This should be based on opportunity. So, I appreciate that President Trump was recently in Southeast Asia. We look forward to getting a little bit more details on some of the trade negotiations that took place. But those trade negotiations, if it's a U.S.-Malaysia deal, should be in the interest of the United States and Malaysia. Other countries in that region should not say, well, you can't enter into that agreement if it negatively impacts us. This is a negotiation between two countries, two sovereign states, and we should think of it as such. And that doesn't exclude Malaysia or other Southeast Asian nations making trade deals with other countries, but they shouldn't be subject to third-party approval. And that really should be a basic good understanding on both sides. So, it could be a multilateral negotiation, but again, the ASEAN countries looking at their own sovereignty and autonomy should be looking at what's in the best interest for their people, their economic growth, et cetera, which is how we look at it for the United States of America as well. I'm wildly optimistic about ASEAN's role in the 21st century. Again, there are challenges, but there's real opportunities when you think about the vibrancy of these economies, when we think about places for U.S. companies to make investments, when we think about the importance of geopolitical security, maritime security, freedom of navigation. ASEAN's at the center of some of this with what we're seeing in Southeast Asia, in the South China Sea. And that isn't what we want in the 21st century. So as we think about this in Congress in a nonpartisan way, and we think about what types of institutions are necessary for the 21st century as technology changes, as AI emerges, as the world becomes a smaller place, how do we work together to create that same context and foundation so our children and grandchildren can enjoy the same peace, prosperity, security, and future that we've certainly benefited from in the past 75 years. So I think that's where this dialogue is incredibly important, the work that the East-West Center does in terms of bringing the two sides together, emphasizing why Asia matters, why the Pacific Island matters is super important. So again, you'll hear from Chairman Kim shortly. We work really well together on these issues, and again, not part of it. So thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit, and I look forward to visiting the region, hopefully, in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Senator. We have a fireside chat scheduled as we wait Representative Kim arriving. So can I invite Barbara Weissel and Mario Masaya up to the front? Just imagine a backdrop of a fire on this cold, dreary day. Look, both of you are experts, but for those of you who have not read or worked with either of our colleagues, Barbara Weissel, as you know, is a veteran of the U.S. Trade Representative Office, played a really important role in earlier negotiations, bilateral, multilateral, including TPP and many other things. Recently wrote a terrific piece in the Carnegie Endowment on the trade deals in Southeast Asia. And Mario Masaya is with the US-ASEAN Business Council, and he is the Vice President for their Research, Technology, and Financial Services. We really thought we'd hone in on this because of the commercial elements, trade elements, investment elements of private sector investment, but also government-to-government relations. So, just a softball question initially to give you each a chance to sort of flesh out your priorities is, we know from the report and the 7th edition of this report that this is an important region for the U.S. But if you could just lay out a couple of risks and opportunities that present themselves to American companies and American engagement in this region. And relatedly, what specifically could ASEAN do as it thinks about engaging in a very different environment in the United States, in a different global environment, a different administration environment? What are things ASEAN you would recommend that ASEAN could do? So let me pose that to you, and Mario, if you particularly focus on digital and financial services, because those are two areas that you are working daily on. Yeah.
Thank you, Satu, and it's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations on this. I will just repeat what everybody else has said. For anyone that works on ASEAN, this has really been critical, and what I usually do when I get this book is to go through and look for the facts and details that I wouldn't have already known, including on the states. So the states I could find to be just fascinating, how some of the states that you wouldn't have expected to be really involved, Kentucky, in the region, are actually quite integrated. And I will make one other point, Ambassador, that when I worked on ASEAN, and people said, oh, I came from working on Korea and Japan and working with China, and people always said, oh, it's hard to work on ASEAN because all the attention is on Northeast Asia. But my view was that sometimes working on a region that doesn't get that much attention allows you to get a lot more done. So you should continue to try to stay below it. I want to say, just in terms of challenges and opportunities ahead, this has been a very difficult year from my perspective. We had the relationship elevated by the Comprehensive Economic or Strategic Partnership in 2022, and that was a really big deal. And what we've seen and has been highlighted earlier is that the security relationship has really grown and continues to be maintained in a significant way, and continues to be critical to both sides, but that for successive administrations, we have worked hard to try to upgrade the economic aspect of the relationship and have that match the security ties, and that has been challenging, and I think will become even more challenging by the bilateral tariffs that the administration has imposed. Now, I know that there are agreements that have been reached, but I guess when I think about the challenges ahead on the trade and economic side, I think one thing is the relative tariff levels. So some of these agreements are being negotiated. We have two, and others under negotiations. As everyone has noted that has been looking at these agreements, what matters is the relative level, not the absolute level. There are a lot of differences here. And so countries that are negotiating, and especially those who have negotiated the early agreements, may find themselves to have been disadvantaged by coming out early when some of the other agreements that are being negotiated have much better terms. And I think that's going to be a challenge going ahead. Another challenge is that there are, ASEAN has forever and ever, as anyone who's worked on this region knows, said, please do not make us choose between the US and China. We will not do that, don't put us in that position. I think there are elements of the agreement that was reached, certainly with Malaysia, that have put Malaysia in that position. And for a while, there was quiet from China. And that sort of puzzled, people were puzzled, why haven't we heard anything from China? Well, now we've heard from China. And China's unhappy about that. And that isn't necessarily, we have interests, they have interests, but I think that from the perspective of the ASEANs, it's very difficult to be put in the middle by the way the commitments were written, not necessarily what we were trying to do, but the way the commitments were written. And so I think that is a challenge going forward. Another challenge is just the question of US reliability. And that has been a question that's been reverberating for several years now, going back to, for instance, the withdrawal from TPP. But the questions and the challenge ahead in terms of US reliability and this relationship, I think, is particularly difficult on the economic side, where companies want certainty. And so when they're not sure what the terms of the agreement will be, if they'll change over time, what is going to happen going forward, it becomes very difficult. Now, that has led to companies wanting to diversify, countries wanting to diversify their relationships with the US, which can be a good thing. Can be good to have much more diversified relationships, as the Commissioner said. But exactly how they're going to be diversified and how that will affect U.S. relations with ASEAN, I think, is a real question. And so let me stop there with challenges because we don't have a lot of time. But I do think that even given the challenges and I think the concerns that ASEANs have expressed about the direction of U.S. trade policy, there are opportunities. Now, this is a very vibrant region. It's very entrepreneurial. We have all the data in here about all the companies and the investment. That is all true. And I don't see anything that changes fundamentally America's interest, U.S. companies' interest in engaging in the ASEAN region. What areas are there that are particularly important? Obviously, critical minerals. There was a critical minerals agreement that was done with Malaysia, also one with Thailand. So, and there are other countries with critical minerals in the region. Presumably, we will want to look for opportunities with them as well. Very important for both us and them, and an area of priority for the U.S. government. Tech, but you're going to talk about that, and digital, but you're going to talk about that. But I will note that those are two very big areas. And then, of course, biotech. And, biotech's an important sector for several of the countries in the region. And we, the United States, are looking for partners in that sector, so I think that remains an important area also.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks so much for laying out this overall picture. We'll come back to you before, but let me lay down one question. We've had a number of initiatives for economic cooperation, whether they be TIFAs and trade agreements and various initiatives that you've been at the center of much of that. And while those may or may not have been ideal or optimum from our perspective, the trend line of U.S. company involvement, U.S. investment, U.S. trade with ASEAN has continued to grow, regardless of not having suboptimal or perfect agreements, et cetera. So I'd like you to say a little bit about that and how companies think of it, because clearly companies have as we heard earlier from Deputy Assistant Secretary, have issues with individual countries and with the region as a whole, and yet the region continues to be very attractive to American companies and private sector. And how can we think about that, and how can we maximize that going forward? Mario, could I turn to you, please, a little bit on technology and financial services? And since you are with USABC, you'll have a little bit of a finger on the pulse of how companies are thinking about that in this new age and in the context of trade agreements and situations. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for that questions, Satu, and thank you for inviting me. And it's really good to talk about ASEAN Matters for America and America Matters for ASEAN. Because for me, it's like I'm talking about my life. So I'm like, okay, good. I love my job too. Like that's fundamental. I love my job too because this is like my life. And I think to answer your question, Satu, I think it is still the biggest. ASEAN is still the biggest secret. Right, so I think for business, like we want to play where people don't look, but people don't see it. Right, there's the opportunity that we want to. Okay, this is the opportunity. We go there and we play, and that's how we make business. It's already crowded, then we leave it to somebody else. So I think I will start with that, and then in terms of digital and financial services, I think last night I was trying to memorize all the data in the book. And obviously,
did you?
I did memorize. I did try. It's better you than me. But it's too many good data. There's too many good data. One of the things that in the book and also Das fundamental mentioned is the young population. Yeah. So I want to leave this the three main opportunities, right, for digital financial. So number one is digital growth, and the book already. The book that you saw. Like $2 trillion US, $1 trillion US with the FI is going to be $2 trillion US by 2030. Young population, I think that's fundamental mentioned about 200 million people, young population. And this is what we call digital natives. This is people that actually wake up and look at TikTok or like Instagram or Facebook. So like me who wake up like, thinking about, okay, some coffee, but they're like wake up and then, Instagram first. So this is what we call digital natives. So they are all there. So that is one key, I would say, determinant factors that make ASEAN very attractive. So that's number one. So the digital growth, the internet penetration, the mobile penetration is 1.3. So that means 1.3. That means 1 in every 3 people in ASEAN will have at least 2 mobile phones, right? So that's pretty huge. Number 2 is e-commerce and digital e-commerce and cross-border payment. I went to Southeast Asia in the past, I would say 3 weeks, and I went to Singapore and Indonesia, and then earlier this year to Thailand and Malaysia, and I didn't even bring cash. So I use QR code everywhere or a credit card. Mostly QR code right now. So people have moved on from cash, I feel like. And I look at the community in ASEAN, and there are a lot of like food stalls, street vendors. They all have QR code now. And that's where I know, wow, even those like food street vendors that usually don't have the opportunity or the ability to use financial services tools, they actually have it, right? And then I have to mention this because I just came back from Singapore FinTech Festival, and since I came back, FinTech Festival is 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. I wake up thinking about buying crypto. Wake up, should I buy Bitcoin now? If you haven't seen the Bitcoin number, you should see it now and see like
the price was down. Yes,
price is so down. So I'm like, okay, this morning I wake up, should I buy now? Maybe not now, maybe tomorrow. But the point about crypto and digital assets are. When I was in Singapore FinTech Festival, they're all talking about the actual use cases. The problem with crypto and digital assets are, can I actually use it? Can I actually transfer my money? Can I do remittances from here to Philippines? So can I actually do that? So I think in ASEAN, I think in Singapore, they're working on it. And in other countries in ASEAN, also they're working on adopting it. When there's an adoption, then I know that it's going to be there. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, and this is related to the challenge of race, right? Is IFA. I think some colleagues already mentioned about IFA. One of the main issue with ASEAN is there are so many meetings, right? 1,300 1,300
Yeah.
meetings a day,
Yeah.
a year. So that's like, there are 365 days a year, right? So that's on 2 times. So right now, as we speak, there are some meetings in ASEAN, and we don't know what it is. But the problem with ASEAN is there are so many digital working groups. I work on the digital stuff for the past 10 years, maybe. And I don't remember like all the ASEAN AI working group, SCAM working group, and ADG SOC, ADG Min, TALMIN, TALSOM, the ADM Plus with the there's so many working groups that it's good for me because I feel like, okay, I know some of this stuff, so I can look smart and I can talk about this with people. But at the same time, it's very hard to navigate. Right? So that's the challenge. DEFA is very important because for people, for businesses, they would think, okay, there are some clarities in ASEAN regulations, in ASEAN harmonized clarities on digital regulation. And we can start talking about whether it's going to be, is it possible to implement it, or how do we enforce it? There are a lot of questions about DEFA on that, but I think it's a good start for ASEAN.
Mario, on your question, on your comments, thank you for which those were terrific. One issue that keeps popping up on my radar screen with ASEAN is AI impact. And there are competing theories of what this impact, you talked about the youth dividend in ASEAN and the digital natives, et cetera. But there is some sense from labor groups and others who estimate that AI will have a significant impact just as ASEAN begins to grow and reach that sort of hallowed middle income economy, that a lot of the service areas, particularly the services sector and sort of white collar jobs, may face an early retrenchment because of AI. So I'm just wondering if you could think about that, and I'll come back to Barbara now and ask you, one of the things about, I asked you about why this trend line of investment, trade, US companies going into ASEAN remains very robust, notwithstanding maybe formal agreements being less than maximum or less than optimum. And relatedly, of course, one of the big stories of ASEAN over the last decade has been its gains because of changes in the US-China trade. And that ASEAN was supposed to be the big winner in the region. Are we going to see that continue, or does it, that issue continues to hang over, whether the tariff levels between China and ASEAN are, and another big issue that you worked on was integrating ASEAN gives American companies advantages because it lowers their transaction costs. Deputy Assistant Secretary spoke very much about that, how a single window has reduced by, I think we were $9 billion, if I remember correctly, $9 billion in reduction in costs and savings. But this integration has slowed down in ASEAN, and I wonder what kind of impact that would have on America. Don't want to throw too much at you.
One question, I don't want to start. I think U.S. companies have been investing in ASEAN for a long time because it is a vibrant region. It has a very entrepreneurial spirit. The governments recognize the value of investment and have built really strong partnerships that can build on one another. And I think, as you know, the successive administration's efforts to promote ASEAN as an alternative to China has only reinforced that. I guess it's too early to say what the impact of the current set of policies will be on whether that affects business. Certainly businesses have been shaken by the uncertainty, but whether or not they see a better alternative or where they see the U.S. policies coming out in the end, I think remains to be seen. ASEAN has a track record, and it's a strong track record dealing with some of these non-tariff barriers, as the administration is trying to do in the trade agreement, will help in that regard. So, it could be that things continue to grow. You point to something that has always bothered me as a person following ASEAN. We talk about ASEAN as the fourth largest trading partner, and all these statistics that we talk about ASEAN being such an important player, but actually we're dealing with ASEAN bilaterally. So it isn't the fourth largest trading partner. It is each of the 10 or now 11 countries have, are ranked somewhere in probably the top 25, most of them, in terms of trade relations with the US. So if I were to say what could be done, it is not just ASEAN integration and making sure that that continues as aggressively as it had been for some time, but dealing with ASEAN partners more effectively, collectively. For those of you I know how frustrated I was over many years when we would have to have US-ASEAN bilateral dialogues on trade. And we'd have an agenda, and then we talk about the agenda at a meeting, and then the ASEANs would say, well, we were not prepared, we'll talk about it again at the next meeting in 6 months. And then 6 months later, we kick it down the road another 6 months. So, my recommendation for this administration and for all the years that I was doing it is pick one or two specific initiatives that you think both sides would really benefit from in terms of, economic goals, and just focus on those. Don't do a laundry list, and then really dedicate the resources from both sides to have outcomes on those areas. Customs is a very important area, and there has been some progress there. But, I think that ASEAN talks a lot about these bilateral relationships with ASEAN, and we need to really make that happen.
Thank you very much. Mario, on AI maybe, or associated thoughts, whatever Barbara said.
Well, I think
We'll open it up to the floor too, so if you have some question you want to ask, we'll go to you next.
it's really good to sit down with Barbara, because she can take care of everything else, and I can take care of my digital and fashion sense babies. AI, I think there are also, that is a good point, and you have to think about like job loss and all these other like resources and research on the impact on jobs. Obviously, there are also other resources that say the impact on jobs is possible. Like I'm not scholars, but I can't say like, well, this is what maybe sports candidate too, but this is what the future looks like. In 10 years, there's gonna be like 1 million people, or these people are gonna lose job. The truck drivers gonna lose job. They're all the Ford and the GM and Toyota. They all will go into go bankrupt because like all the AI companies the Chinese companies, BYD and others, are utilizing AI in their cars, and the cars becomes like automatic, whatever. So those, that kind of thinking, I think in the 10 years or so, people can think however they want to think. But I think the fact is AI is going to stay no matter what we do. I don't think there is any single force in the world that can say like, okay, we're going to block AI. And people suddenly say, okay, then no more AI. I don't think so. Right? It's going to stay. So I will embrace it. I would embrace it, and I would just, okay, it's going to be here. So let's work together with partners use that. I use the right AI to help us. Obviously, other bad actors are also using AI for bad intention. So we have to look at that and address that. The other thing that I found in the past 2-3 years when I go to ASEAN Digital Ministers meeting, the feelings are different with us here in the US. I think in ASEAN there are more people, like at least in the conversation, they didn't ask me about like, okay, well, are they gonna take like all this like job from these people? They're more positive. They're more optimistic. They're not like, oh, people are like, okay, there are some fear, but it's not fear based. I think
what is their optimism based on?
I think so 2023, 24, 25, I've been as an digital minister, I think partly because of COVID and the jump from ASEAN to adopt technology because of COVID have made them, okay, well actually we can actually do it. And then they look at the new technology advancements and innovation like AI, and they will be like, okay, well, I just adopt it and they use it. That's probably why that they are more optimistic than other regions. But for us and for me, I'm like, okay, this is positive.
Thank you. I think we're going to take a quick pause here because we have Representative Kim joining us. And as many of you know, she's the chair of the East Asia and Pacific Subcommittee on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We're delighted for your support once again, Representative Kim. Thanks so much.
Hello.
I appreciate it.
Sorry to interrupt. I'll make it very, very quick. And really good to see you. I am Congresswoman Young Kim. I currently chair the House Foreign Affairs Committee's subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific. And let me first thank the East-West Center and the US-ASEAN Business Council for convening all of us and hosting today's launch of the ASEAN Matters for America and America Matters for ASEAN report. Where's the report? When I travel to the region, this has really become a very important tool, and I refer to it often in my engagements with our counterparts. And I see Ali here, good to see you, and everyone else here. ASEAN, as you know, is an indispensable to free and open Indo-Pacific and to America's regional strategy and global competitiveness. For over 4 decades, this partnership has delivered deep economic ties, digital trade commitments, critical minerals, and then joint maritime cooperation. ASEAN's momentum is accelerating. As the recent ASEAN Matters report emphasizes, the bloc boasts the world's 3rd largest labor force and is on track to become the 4th largest economy by 2030. Much of ASEAN's coming growth will be concentrated in vital industries like electric vehicles, critical minerals, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals. Past success and future potential demand sustained our US engagement. The Trump administration has recognized this reality. President Trump's participation in the recent 13th US-ASEAN Summit in October and his decisive role in securing the Thailand-Cambodia ceasefire demonstrate that renewed commitment. Yet, our Indo-Pacific partners seek greater clarity and a coherent US economic framework, which is, I believe, very long overdue. So in September, I helped lead the passage of the Partner with ASEAN Act in the House, something that I carry over from the previous Congress, and we hope that this will help some clarity and further strengthen our relationship with ASEAN. And this bill grants ASEAN nations the diplomatic privileges and immunities and would establish permanent mission in Washington. That will also help deepen our day-to-day engagement. The Indo-Pacific faces persistent and complex challenges, including CCP threats to maritime and economic freedom, shifting supply chains, and a delicate balance of power. These challenges are also opportunities if we act together. As subcommittee chair, I'm committed to keeping the US-ASEAN relationship at the center of our Indo-Pacific strategy. Stronger trade, security, and diplomatic ties with ASEAN are not optional. These are essential to American prosperity and leadership in the 21st century. I really want to thank you so much for giving me a couple minutes to speak and address you, and I'm going to get back to my financial services committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for accommodating Representative Kim. She's so important to the U.S.-Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific relationship, and certainly to us in Southeast Asia. We're delighted to have her thoughtful remarks. Returning to the panel, as I mentioned, that there would be an opportunity to ask some questions from the floor. So if there are any, Blair and then Ambassador, please just briefly introduce yourself. And so,
Blair King, And actually, my question is directed at the Honorable Deputy Assistant Secretary. For full transparency, I was one of the career foreign service officers arrested from the US-ASEAN on July 1st. I must take exception to your characterization of this as a normal realignment. I experienced 4 of those myself. I will follow up with a question then. All of those, from Bush 43 to Obama to Trump 1 to Biden, were undertaken in a very thoughtful, strategic, careful way. This was not. This was wanton destruction by Elon Musk and his Doge minions. And what it has done, effective development, just like effective diplomacy, strong business and trade ties, move at the speed of trust. What the last 10 months have done is destroy that trust, not just in Southeast Asia, but around the world. So it's very concerning to me when I hear you talk, I know it's a bit of an offhand kind of joking comment, your colleague next door is a checkbook. But effective development is much more. So my question to you is, if it's just a checkbook, what is your theory of development?
Thank you. I'm happy to take that.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was going to be a question from the panel.
So first, I'm just saying, personal side, I'm sorry. We understand we got ripped. That's a personal thing. Part for you on that, but that was the call that was made. And just know that my personal level, I'm sorry on that. I appreciate that. On the checkbook side, it wasn't I apologize if it came off hard. It was more really talking about development, like the power of, we have a project or a strategy or something we're trying to accomplish, like the ability within EAP to go talk to the DAS next door that does regional assistance and security programs. Like his team are so good. We brought in people from USA on how they run those programs. And so the checkbook, again, didn't mean to be flipped, but it's more the ability of, okay, we want to accomplish this, for Malaysia, right? It's like, okay, we want to accomplish, what are some things that we can turn on to talk about building trust for that exact purpose, right? It's like, oh, we're going to invest in this project, we're investing in this line of effort, we're going to show up with money to do so, to accomplish this goal or that goal. I'll tell you, for the Philippines, like we turned that on for deliverables, for the president's visit, for Thailand, Cambodia, like those were carrots to bring people to the table of Musk money, which I know kids here like turn on Musk money, these other programs we know are part of us from the country. So it's the ability within EAP to unilaterally, we still send it out, so you know the clearance process on that. But it's the initiative within the East Asia Bureau and the other regional bureaus as well have that ability to kind of their pot of money that we have, to utilize to advance. So that's kind of what that means.
I appreciate you taking the question. Was thinking about the panel. Ambassador, there's just the last question, and we're going to close because we want to give you a chance to enjoy the refreshments and breakfast.
It's not a question, a comment.
Okay.
Because I believe that I've spent many years doing ASEAN.
Great.
Keywords, when you do ASEAN, have a lot of patience. ASEAN is unique. Now we have 11, before we have 10. But what is important is that ASEAN, as an association, it provides you the framework. So later on, I agree, you go bilaterally. If within that bilateral agreement go against what has been agreed in principle within the ASEAN, then you're not going to make much headway. And then secondly, ASEAN essentially, we love American companies. It goes back to your comment, Mario, because we have noticed over the years, American companies, they are very open to giving senior positions to the local. IBM, Texas Instruments, what have you, Honeywell. So you see, if you move around within ASEAN, you see local. I mean, as compared to other companies. And then this is an anecdote. Way back in 2013, 2014, there was some 600, 700 meetings of ASEAN in a year. So I was DG of ASEAN for Malaysia. We decided to reduce the number of meetings. You know what happened? We ended up to have a meeting
about
to reduce the number of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think that's a really important point that we sometimes miss in the data. And I haven't figured out if someone has a way of capturing all that. It's just remarkable in my, as I mentioned, 2 visits to Malaysia, both in October and November, for various things, meeting with our embassy and our embassy team. It's really quite remarkable to me, the number of American companies that play a critical role throughout Southeast Asia on training, on corporate social responsibility, on engagement with alumni, on having locals be part of their governance teams and their managing and operations teams. This is, I think, a very unique benefit of American companies and why they're so welcome in the region, notwithstanding, obviously there are inevitably some issues that need to be addressed to make it even more attractive, domestic issues, etc. And the second thing I want to just close with is, I'll tell you a little story, because this will be my last edition of ASEAN Matters for America. So I just on a personal note, I just say that I'll be involved in. But I just want to say one thing about this. I got taken over the coals when I first did this report by someone at the State Department, very well-meaning person, very nice person. And the argument was really a very good argument. ASEAN didn't do any of this. The individual countries did. And you're misrepresenting it. I have the email still. It's a rather charming email. That you're painting an ASEAN brush over what have been essentially country bilateral relationships. And remember, the first one came out in 2010 when we, 2009, signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. We were looking at the Indo-Pacific in a different way. We were thinking about how to engage with all the region. The region was talking, and ASEAN itself was talking about integration and the pillars of the community. And it goes back to that tension about this report. And we do Pacific Islands, which are somewhat more coherent because of the Pacific Island Forum and other things. And we do APEC and other reports in this Asia Matters for America series. But I still continue to believe that the bilateral and the multilateral, the ASEAN grouping, has to be seen by the United States together. Our building blocks will always be bilateral. But ASEAN's role as both convener, as an integration aspiration, and as a region of growth and opportunity for the United States remains important. So I'll stick with my view that ASEAN Matters for America. This isn't to say that we don't have individual country ones, as our colleague from Philippine Embassy knows very well. We have a Philippine Matters for America for the 75th anniversary of the US-Philippine alliance and relationship. And that doesn't preclude Philippines also importance in ASEAN. So I just wanted to say that to bring this meeting to a close, and I would invite all of you to thank all of the speakers, including our fireside chat experts, and then please join us for some coffee or tea or some breakfast if you haven't had a chance, and some networking opportunity. Thank you all so much for taking the time.